Welcome to the realm of magic and mystery, classic horror and sci-fi. You are now entering the House of the Unusual podcast with your hosts, Eddie and Joe. Welcome all you cool ghouls and friendly fiends to the House of the Unusual podcast. I'm your host, Joe Pavlansky. With me as always is the maestro of mail order mysteries, Eddie Guevara, and also horror magician extraordinaire, Chuck Caputo. Today's very special guest is the one and only Sara Karloff, daughter of the original Frankenstein's monster, Boris Karloff. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
All right. Good to be here.
Hello there.
So before we get started here, this podcast will be going out on Thanksgiving Day, so a very happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. Hope you guys don't eat too much, and hope you have time to listen to the podcast on Thanksgiving Day. And I'd just like to say real quick that I am thankful for all of you guys out there, Eddie, Chuck, for Sara for being on, and for all of our listeners out there for tuning in to us every week and hopefully enjoying our podcast. A big thank you. I'm very grateful for everybody out there. I'm also very grateful for the friends of our podcast and for the House of the Unusual, and we're going to go through them real quick. So if you guys need some ideas for Christmas gifts, birthday gifts, or just want to pick something up for yourselves, go visit these websites. You won't be disappointed. First off, we have Stupid Comics Magazine, and that's stupid spelled STOOPID. And this is a great black and white comics magazine, kind of along the ways of Mad Magazine and Cracked, kind of rolled into one, and it's absolutely hilarious. They have tons of great artists and writers in there. Go pick it up. It's on issue number 5 right now, and that's stupidcomicsmagazine.com. Also, if you head over to mymoviemonsters.com, that is your home base for Scary Monsters magazine. They have the pre-order out now for issue number 124, the Chilly Thrillers and Frosty Frights issue. There are 2 covers for that. There is a pre-order cover and one that will be on the newsstand, so definitely check that out. You could also pick up your back issues on that site as well, and that's mymoviemonsters.com. Also, our buddy Dave Haversat has a great website at 1878press.com, and that's 1878press.com. Tons of great books on there on Houdini, magic, mentalism, mail order stuff, all that great stuff. Tons of books on there, very good prices, a lot of them discounted. Definitely check them out. And also our buddy Todd Machin, the king of the sea monkeys, he has a great website at sea-monkeys.com. This is your home place for all your sea monkey needs. They have tons of different aquariums, T-shirts, cards. You could even get a crustacean college diploma there if you so wish, to show that you graduated from the Sea Monkeys University. Also, if you want to send out some great Christmas cards, he has a whole line of sea monkey themed greeting cards there, and you could just spruce them up for, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, or whatnot on them, and send them out to your sea-loving friends. All right, so that's all we got today, and we are going to start with our guest. So we have a very special guest today. This is her first time on the podcast, but I'm sure a lot of you guys out there listening know about her, and her name is Sara Karloff. And you know what? It's not going to do much good for me to do the introduction because I'll probably miss a lot of stuff. So, Sara, I'm going to turn it over to you and tell our audience, a little bit about yourself and, what's going on in your life. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I've never introduced myself before. Let's see. I'm Sara Karloff. I'm the only child of movie legend Boris Karloff. And I think that speaks for itself. My father was an absolutely wonderful human being, absolutely the antithesis of the roles he played. He was adored by everybody who knew him personally and respected by everybody who worked with him. He was one of the founding members of the Screen Actors Guild. His card number was number 9. He was passionate about that work, as he was about his profession. He felt he was one of the luckiest people in the world to be able to earn his living doing something he loved and then be jolly well paid for it. He just was a lovely man with a wonderful sense of humor, a very kind soul, and a very large talent.
Awesome. Awesome. Very well said. And Sarah, I also understand that November 23rd, yesterday, as we're recording, was your birthday. So
It was
happy
his
birthday.
also.
What's that?
It was his birthday also. I was born on my father's 51st birthday. I was the most expensive birthday present he ever got.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday. Wow.
Well, happy birthday. And I'm gonna ask Eddie and Chuck to join in with me at singing happy birthday.
Oh, please don't.
So happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sarah. Happy birthday to you. Yeah!
Thank you, but don't give up your day jobs.
You're saying I wouldn't make a good singer.
Oh, man.
Ever.
It was a little off key. It was a little off key. I could tell. Yeah, definitely.
Well, you know what? I may not be a good singer, but we do have a good magician with us, and his name is Chuck Caputo. You guys all know him out there. So, Chuck, welcome to the podcast once again. And how's everything going over there in Pittsburgh, PA?
All right, Joe. Cold. It's been very cold here, and I got about a week off. I've been doing some things around the house. Then my Christmas shows start up. But I'd like to wish everybody out there, our viewing audience, our listening audience, a very happy Thanksgiving. I hope everything goes well. And it's a pleasure to talk to you, Sarah. I'm a huge fan of your father. I mean, he was one of a kind. I mean, I'm a big fan of his movies, all the way up to The Grinch That Stole Christmas.
Oh, yes.
Awesome.
Well, you can't tell, but I smile broadly whenever anybody says anything about the Grinch. My father was very, very modest, and he never really brought his work home. He never talked about his work. But one night the phone rang, and I have two sons, and they were little guys at the time. And he said, "I've done something. I think it's pretty good, and I thought maybe you and the boys would like to, maybe if you can, maybe if you'd like to." And they sort of hedging about. Sit down and watch it tonight. It's going to be on the telly. And then he said, well, it's called How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Pretty good. Yeah, I guess he won a Grammy for it, for Best Animated Work. And as a family, we are so proud of it, and we just love it. And they always play it way too early in the season, and I always miss it. And my Christmas present to myself last year was this life-size Grinch that you plug in, and he wiggles his hips, and he wiggles his neck, and then he sings some of the lines from the Grinch. And that was my present to myself last year. I just love the Grinch. So, Chuck, I must love you too.
that is definitely a Christmas classic, and I'm sure everybody out there enjoys it. One person that's not a Grinch here is definitely Eddie Guevara, who set up this interview. So Eddie, what's going on over at House of the Unusual? How's everything been? And welcome back from Florida.
Everything's been really good, and I had the opportunity to go to Coral Castle in Florida, which according to phenomenal. You have a 98-pound guy lifting boulders that are 28 tons. I thought that was a pretty good, overall. Although I had a deluge of water come down because it was raining like I've never seen before. So we took the tour, me and my mom, and it was pouring, and the rain was just not fun. But it's kind of funny when, Sarah right now said about that Grinch statue, because I bought it when it came out too.
It's wonderful, isn't it fun?
Oh, it's funny. I got it, and the reason I got it is because I usually like buying all the animated stuff, like the Santa Claus, especially in Halloween. I used to have a little way of doing about it. I used to go about it before that Walmart would let you put things on layaway. So I would go out and put about 3 or 4 of the life-size skeletons or whatever it was. And there was one that looked like an Uncle Fester. It was, 7 feet tall, whatever, 6 feet tall. And I would put them on layaway, and then I picked them up 10 days after after Halloween, and I got 75% off all of them.
Oh,
They caught on to that. They didn't do that too much often, but I have so many of those life size. I got about at least 15, 20 of them. Wow. And I have an actual one that's very hard to come by now, which is, it was done by Jemmy Works, and it's actually Sarah. It's the Boris Karloff 6 foot. Yeah. It's a 6 foot Frankenstein. You could see it sometimes. In fact, I think, if I'm correct, Joe, when you went to that show that you went to, what is it called?
Monster Palooza?
Monster Bash.
Oh,
Monster Bash. Yeah, Monster Bash. They had one. The one you took a picture of, that's the one I have.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Can someone email me a copy of that?
Sure. Joe, don't you have it on your thing?
Yeah, I'll have to find it on my phone. And I'll send it over to you, Eddie, and you could email it to her.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, speaking of shows, Sarah, you do a lot of shows and all that, and Eddie sent me some pictures from, I believe that was Chiller Theater. Is that where you guys were, Eddie, when you sent those pictures?
Yes, and I was really shockingly surprised how beautiful Sarah came out in that picture. Sarah, that's one of your best.
It's a matter of opinion.
I knew you were gonna say. No, everybody, it's funny because it came out really, really nice, and I was gonna, upload it to my Facebook because, Sarah, you look like super young on that thing, and it made you
look. Mouth. I mean, I'm not super young, but in the picture, thanks a lot.
But I'm telling you,
older than dirt.
I'm the oldest one here. Come on.
How old are you?
Old enough.
How old are you?
How old are you, Joe? Tell her.
41.
Oh, yeah, you're the oldest.
I'm the oldest one here.
Yep, definitely the oldest.
Sarah just turned, what, 25 yesterday? So,
24,
yeah.
24.
Times 3.5. We don't need. Can we change the subject?
Yeah, talk about something else.
Of course.
Okay, Eddie, yeah. I want to know about the House of the Unusual. I know nothing about it.
Now you're going to get him started.
Your time. But I'd like to know about it sometime. So you have my email, Sara Karloff at Karloff.com. And send me some information on it. Would you please?
Of course I will. In fact, it was kind of funny because back when I first started, Sarah, the House of the Unusual was when I first, I think, met you about, 15, 20 years ago, going to Chiller. And one of the things is that I always did it as a hobby, but then me and Joe about a year and a half, actually, we're actually in the second season. We've done a total, if I'm correct, 76 episodes of this podcast. And Joe had been a customer of mine for 20 years. And he was
seems like it.
I think it was because I have emails that go back to like 2010, 2000. And the thing with is that Joe would always tell me every year, "Hey, how you doing, buddy?" So I reached out to him one day when I found out he was a writer for Scary Monsters and for a couple of magazines. You know what, Joe? Why don't we start? And Joe said, "Yeah, sure." And then Chuck was in the hospital at the time. I forgot what you were doing, Chuck. And you said to me,
"Not much fun."
He was there with his wife, I think, at the time. But the thing is, Chuck was looking at the internet, and he came across one of my ads that I was selling, a thing called the Great Leon Miniature Haunted House, which is a book. And he goes, "Hey, Eddie, I'm a magician," and blah, blah, blah. And the next is history. Ever since I met him, me and Chuck joined forces with Joe here and Todd, and we've kind of made the House of the Unusual into something that's really more than a hobby. And it's getting better each time. And we are now about 6,234 listeners a week, I think. And, it's getting to be very, very popular. Now, my center of the universe, believe it or not, is Frankenstein. I have all these collectibles here of the Frankenstein. And my very first, coming from Cuba at the age of 4, back in 1968, I actually ordered the... I ordered the, what do you call it? The 7-foot Frankenstein monster from the comic books. And I had it up on my wall. And that was my favorite. Here's what turned me into, the monster altogether was the Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein when I met.
Oh yeah.
My dad wasn't in that,
Sarah, that was a question I wanted to ask you. I know, and this is kind of funny the way it happened, though. I remember when originally Dracula came out in 1929, I think it was.
31.
31, okay, 1931. And Bela Lugosi, which I thought was kind of funny the way when they asked him to play the monster, he didn't want to play the monster. So he went to the doctor. He gets himself some type of a prescription saying that his back was bad, and he didn't take it. So they took your father, who was just coming into acting, and that actually made it that there was never a time, I think, that your father always made double the money that Bela did all his life, due to the fact that your father was so great on it. And was that a similar thing that happened to your dad when he turned down the Abbott and Costello proposition to play the monster in the show? Because I think he thought it was going to be funny. He didn't want to portray a serious monster in a comedy. And then later on, he went on to take the roles of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and meets the Mummy. Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy. Was there similarity in that stuff? Do you remember? Did he ever mention anything to you about that?
Well, let's start by saying, no matter how old you may think I am, I was not born when Frankenstein was made. Okay. Then we'll move on from there and say that my father actually made the decision himself. Well, we'll back up a bit. Bela was when Bela was offered the role of Frankenstein first, before my father was ever considered. And he turned it down because it was not a speaking role and because there was so much makeup covering the creature. And that was when the first director, name escapes me at the moment, I know it, but I can't think of it, was going to direct the film. And he turned it down for those two reasons. Then James Whale was selected as the second director, and it was and Bela had already turned down the role, and they were looking for they'd already started shooting the film without anybody cast as the role of the monster. And that's incredible on its own. But they had shot quite a bit of the film already. And one day, my father was in the commissary at Universal, having done a criminal code. And James Whale invited him over to have a cup of coffee. And my father was totally an unknown actor at that point. He was coming up in the ranks, but he was not a known actor at all, as Bela was already a known actor. And Frankenstein was actually my father's 81st film. And as my father said, nobody saw the first 80. But James Whale asked my father if he would consider or be interested in testing for the part. And of course, at that point in my father's career, and he was 10 years into his being in Hollywood, he would have jumped at any part, testing or not. And so he worked with Jack Pierce for over almost 2 weeks. And Jack was the head of the makeup department at that point at Universal, and he worked for about 2 weeks with Jack Pierce on the makeup. And Jack had done a lot of studying about what a body would look like if they implanted or put in a brain, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was new eyes on the part with James Whale as director, and new eyes on the makeup with Jack Pierce. And so my father was delighted to have any employment at that time. And when they completed the makeup, they did the test roll, and thank goodness for my father's portrayal, which is really quite empathetic. he was cast in the role. You may notice that at the beginning of the film, it's a question mark for as who portrayed the monster. At the end of the role, the film, in the rolling credits at the end, it does give my father's name. My father was not even invited to the premiere because Colin Clive, Dr. Frankenstein, was anticipated as being the star of the film, not the monster, and nobody knew whether or not this film. Nobody anticipated this film being the huge success that it was. So my father went home and went to bed. I mean, he hadn't even seen the full film for, I don't know, it had been released and been a smash hit until for a month probably. And he and my mother went to San Francisco to visit a college friend of my mother's at UC Berkeley. And it happened to be playing up in Berkeley. And so they sort of snuck in to see it with this friend of my mother's. And the scene in which, and my father had never seen the whole entire film. And so the scene in which my father turns around in, the opening shot of my father in the makeup, and he turns around in the doorway. And my mother's name was Dorothy, and her nickname was Dot. And at that point, my mother's friend yells out in this theater, "Oh my God, Dot, how could you live with such a creature?" Whereupon they were escorted out of the theater. And my father didn't even see the rest of the film that time. So it was long down the line before he ever got to see the film himself. But it was an overnight success. And after 20 years in the business, 10 years in British Columbia in repertory theater, and 10 years in Hollywood, after 20 years, he was an overnight star.
Wow.
He really had to put
Bela,
in
the part of what you said about Bela is not accurate. He didn't, at that point, he didn't go and get pills, etc. He didn't. He just decided it was a non-speaking part, and he was a gifted, accomplished, well-known actor in Hungary before he ever came over to this country. And then he had this, he starred on the stage in Dracula, and he was the star in the film, and he just didn't want to do a non-speaking role, and he didn't want to be all covered up with his makeup. Sure. So he turned it down.
One of the things that I was that's because I'm sure over time people, in order to make good writing or attractive writing, they bring in that there was kind of like an issue between.
That's a very frequently asked question. Was there this rivalry or this? They made 7 films together, and I have several interviews with my father in which that's one of the most frequently asked questions. If there was some rivalry or what was your real relationship with Bela. And my father's answer always is he had great respect for Bela because he was a very accomplished actor, a very great actor. And they worked together very compatibly on many films. The only problem was that Bela did not bother to learn the language in which he earned his bread and butter. And he was not as fluent in English as he might have been to branch out into some of the roles that he played, portrayed, or later was offered.
One of the things when you said that is kind of funny because one of the, growing up and stuff, I realized that both what your father and Bela did, it's amazing. First of all, when your father walks through the doorway, that's probably the iconic best Frankenstein photo ever. Mm-hmm. And another one is
in the first.
Yeah,
in the first, which gives it a lead on All Judgments.
Right, exactly. And then the other thing that was kind of funny too is that with Bela, every time you hear a vampire, no matter what it is or what character cartoon, they speak like Bela. And he comes in from the, Sesame Street with the count.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of funny because if you look at the count sideways, it looks like Bela. So they definitely made it after him. Now,
you know what, Eddie? You know what's funny is that you talk about everyone imitating Bela. I think too a lot of people, and I'm thinking back to when I was young and was imitating the Frankenstein monster. I think we all kind of imitated the Boris Karloff, just going
absolutely,
going after people, and it almost seems like if you ask somebody nowadays, to do a Frankenstein, or if you're at a show and somebody has a mask on or a costume, they still do that that goes back to the original movie.
That's
and
right.
not only that,
I cannot tell you how many people, when I was in college, would come up to me straight armed and stiff legged and walk toward me. Oh my goodness!
I love the makeup. I tell you what, the makeup was fantastic. And if you read the original book from Mary Shelley, I mean, I don't think there was a description of what Frankenstein would have looked like. So that was their conception of it, and that's the one that stuck. I mean, and
that was James Whale's study of anatomy of what the flat head. You'd have to open up the top of the skull. I mean, it's pretty gory.
Yeah.
But you open up the top of the skull and you put the brain in, and then it'd be a flat top.
Wow.
Yeah, but also remember this. I was going to say also remember this too. It was called the monster. Somehow Boris Karloff associated. I mean, the name became with him as Frankenstein, but they called it the monster. Frankenstein was the doctor that created
That's
it.
right.
That's true.
So he got the name along with it too, and just took over the whole thing.
now, speaking of makeup, Sarah, is this story true? And you wouldn't remember it at the time, but
no,
I'm sure
it's not, because I know what you're going to ask. But go ahead.
Which one is it? All right. So supposedly, during filming of Son of Frankenstein, that your father had to leave the set while in full makeup and went to the hospital looking like that while you were born.
Do you believe that?
You know what? I could actually see it happening. A father's first child being born, and them saying, "You know what? I'm getting to the hospital no matter what," and walking in there in full makeup.
Do you think they'd let him off the set in that makeup? One, what taxi driver would give him a ride on a corner? Two, and
Who
three,
wouldn't give Frankenstein's monster a ride?
The nurse would have dropped the baby.
So that story is incorrect then.
Couldn't be more so. My father was climbing out of the pit in that scene, thinking the cameras were still running. And when he got to the top of the pit and the top of the ladder, at a table further back from the edge of the pit, they were having a birthday party for him with cupcakes and baby shoes. Okay? Because I'd just been born.
Wow.
Then he changed his clothes and went to the hospital. They cut shooting for the day. He changed, and there's a fairly well-known picture, maybe not as well-known as the story, the opposite story, but then there's a fairly well-known picture of my father smartly dressed, standing over the nurse at the hospital, looking at the nurse holding the newborn baby.
Well, that's a lot better than I think Frankenstein's monster running in a hospital. Because I can only imagine being
really. The nurse would have dropped the baby.
You know what's funny about that too? When you said the hands stretch out and all that stuff in the Frankenstein, even Bugs Bunny, the Bugs Bunny episodes where they have, I think it's Daffy Duck. He's I don't know, he's a detective or something, and then the monsters start coming out, and there's a Frankenstein monster with their hands outreach. Like they just copied that over and over.
But could you imagine being at the hospital with like a serious illness, thinking you're going to die or something, and you're laying in your bed, and all of a sudden here comes Frankenstein's monster walking down the hallway. You're
right. Well, we started out this conversation about Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein, at the end of the Son of Frankenstein, my father, well, actually at the end of the making of Frankenstein, my father's life had been so pivotal. It had made such a pivotal difference in my father's life, both personally and professionally, that he really felt such a debt to that film, because he'd been in the business at that time, as I'd said before, for 10 years in British Columbia and 10 years in Hollywood. He felt such a debt of gratitude to that role. So by the time he had finished, Son of Frankenstein, he felt that, I'm going to cough again, excuse me. He felt that that role had reached its logical conclusion. The scripts had reached a point where, and the character had reached such a point that anything further would be making a mockery of the character, the monster, and the scripts would do nothing but go downhill. And so, in my opinion, and this is not just to agree with my father, he was correct. And so when Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein came up, he declined to do it. He worked with them on other films, other projects, but not on that one. And he never played the role of Frankenstein again, except in Route 66 with Lon Chaney, and I'm not sure that Bela was in it. I'm not sure Bela was still alive, but he did play that on Route 66 one time. But he never played Frankenstein again.
You know,
he would play the doctor or some other role in a Frankenstein film, but he never played that role again.
So what was his opinion on the movie? Did he enjoy the movie, or did he even watch it? Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
I don't know if he saw it or not. He didn't talk about other films. He didn't talk about actors. He didn't talk about his own work. So I really have no idea if he saw the film.
So he really didn't talk anything about work when he came home. It was kind of like, he almost had just two lives, his stage life and then his personal life.
Well, he was so different from the roles he played. I mean, my father was the gentlest of gentlemen. He was an English gentleman. His passions were the game of cricket, which couldn't be more British. He loved animals. At one time, he and my mother had 22 dogs in Beverly Hills.
Wow. Oh, that would be heaven.
Oh, yeah. He loved gardening. There are photographs of him with a top hat on and his wickies, which are shorts and no shirt on. I mean, adored gardening. He just was so different a human being from the roles he played.
Wow, it's amazing.
And yet he was so compassionate and so passionate about his work with the Screen Actors Guild. He was one of the 12 founding members, and he never talked about that.
Sarah, when you never talked, I remember long time ago, me and you were speaking one time, and you mentioned the thing that your father never collected his career. Remember that?
Oh, don't I wish he'd collected his posters?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, come on.
Now, Sarah, what
collected his career?
Now, Sarah, what? Now, he never talked about any of that, at home or anything. And you could have, after his passing, you could have very well have, not had any dealings with it, or just, at a minimum. But you seem to be very involved. What was the thing that really got you involved with your father's work?
I was invited to, I had met Forrest Ackerman. Well, he had met me. And so I went to Forrest's house one day with my kids because it was something I was showing my kids. I went to the ladies' room and closed the door, and there was my father staring right at me. I was really out of my zone. But a few years later, I was invited to the famous Monsters of Filmland reincarnation or whatever it was called, that was held back east in Maryland, right outside of Washington. And I'd never heard of these conventions or anything. And Bela Lugosi Jr. was going, and Ron Chaney was going, and wonderful Dwight Fry Jr. was going. Oh, I miss him so. And so I thought, I was curious about what the other guys looked like, and I was the only girl person in the group. A girl, female in the group. And so I asked my husband if we should go to this, and we'll go to it. Why not? And it was held when it was beautiful colors back east. And so we went to it, and we were like the children of the night. I mean, we couldn't move 5 feet without the fans going berserk. I've never signed. It was like paying my bills for a year at one time. I've never signed so many things in my entire life. And somebody asked me if I'd been down to the dealer's room. And I, honest to goodness, thought they were playing poker. I had no idea what was going on. That was my introduction to fandom. Absolutely my introduction to fandom. It was it was Memorial Day weekend. And so at the Capitol, they were having a wonderful bands playing, patriotic songs. And by that Saturday night or Sunday, we were so exhausted from being famous. We'd had our 15 minutes of fame. None of us were used to it. That we decided we'd take a picnic to this. And so but how are you going to take a picnic from a hotel? So I ordered room service and, sandwiches and stuff. And we bought a couple of bottles of champagne. And after all, there were 4 of us or 5 of us or 6 of us. But how are we going to get it from here to there? Well, we took the bedspreads off, and we used Dwight's laundry bag for some of it. And we had, they brought it all beautifully to my hotel room. And we had glasses, and we had silverware, and we had plates. We had all this jingly jangly stuff. And we packed it up in our bedspreads and our laundry bags. And then we figured, we have to get through the lobby and out the front door. How are we ever going to do this without being descended upon? So we did it individually. And we took all this stuff out, and we made it to the concert on the Capitol lawn. And we spread all this out. Now, you have to understand, we haven't had 5 minutes to ourselves in 2 days without being asked to sign something. We spread all this out, and there are all these people around us. And we realized after 10 minutes, nobody had asked us to sign anything. And we thought, what's wrong with this picture? Don't they know who we are? We were crushed. But we enjoyed our time away from being famous. And we went back to the hotel, and we were famous again. We loved it. But that was my introduction to what goes on. And when I went down to the dealer's room, and there were no cards, but there were lots of photographs of me and my husband on our honeymoon, down visiting my father on a set of something. They had pictures of me and my father on the balcony of the Chateau Marmont, taken with my camera. I have no idea how these people got hold of all of this stuff. So those were the dealers. Now I are one.
You know, Sarah, I want to bring to your attention back. I think it was last year when this podcast was doing, starting out. There's a girl that does toy reviews on YouTube, and she's very popular. She's got in fact, she's got some of her things for 1 million hits, some of her videos. And she had, I don't know, somehow in one of the reviews, I appeared in her back when she was going over what people used to buy from mail order based on the book by Kirk Damaris, Mail Order Mysteries. And I said to my wife, what am I doing in her video? So whatever the reason, fast forward, I got a hold of her. We talked and stuff. And I sent her a few things, and she did a review. And when she did the review, that month of last, I think it went crazy with the sales. And now I sell, in 1963, there was a toy company called Lowell Toy Company in Long Island. And they produced a Frankenstein that was 6 feet in full color, and they produced a Dracula. And it was actually the first time it was sold through Famous Monsters of Filmland, and it appeared in the 126 issue, which is The Outer Limits. I think that was the first time ever advertised, if I'm correct. Anyway, I started selling those posters, and that particular month, I think I did over 68 of the Frankenstein, I think 36, 37 of the Dracula. Now, Frankenstein was like the best seller, which it demands, I think, like 80% of it would be women. Guys that buy it. And the Dracula, out of all the ones that I sold, I think about 30% or more, like 40% of it was females that bought the Dracula. I think they buy the Dracula because they're fascinated with vampires over Frankenstein, which will be more a manly toy, which that's why I gravitate to Frankenstein since I was young. Now, what I was going to tell you that was interesting is when you look at those two characters, even though they did not have Boris or Bella, you can see it's them because it looks like them in the image. You can see it's kind of them. Now, the other thing that was kind of funny with that is one time, and this was hilarious, I go to Chiller, and Sarah, you got to remember this. I had some guy sent me 10 little Frankensteins. And when I got the 10 Frankensteins, I go up to you, and I'm thinking it's your father and stuff, and you go ahead and you sign them for me, And then you go, wait a minute. You look and you go, this is not my father. This is a Chinese knockoff. So I still have all 10, and it's so funny because I have them there lined up. And I always remember you every time I look at them because I say I will never sell them because I promised her to. And one thing I'm going to tell you, Sarah, that I really miss, when you and Pat Costello, Abbott and Costello's daughter, came to Jersey City in Journal Square, and you did the show there. I live approximately 2 miles from there. And I didn't know that had gone on. And after it passed, I was shocked that I wasn't there, And I'm like, I can't believe it. I remember that now. Talking about Abbott and Costello, I don't know if you guys are aware, and this was kind of interesting, just like you said, how your father got the joy of hearing that you were born while, on the film. Costello, one day he had a 2-year-old kid, and you know the story, obviously, or I don't know if it was 1-year-old, I think. And he wanted to go on the radio, and he told his kid, you're going to listen to Daddy on the radio, whatever. So he gets a call when he's about to go on, and they tell him that his kid had just drowned. One of the saddest things ever. And then after they did that, he went on to go on, and they asked him later, how were you able to go on? And he said, because I knew my son will still be hearing me. And I thought that was such a catching moment when I read that and stuff. And it tells you, how some of these actors that we grew up loving had sometimes, not great lives. They had sad lives, even though that we thought that they were like the best of the best, But one thing I can tell you is this: Frankenstein, I think, in any genre, they keep doing movies of it. It's probably and the photo that your father portrayed, where he's walking in underneath the the overpass whenever he's coming out like a dungeon. I actually took that photograph and I blew it up. I think it's 60 inches wide by like 7 feet tall. Because I really blew that up because that was my favorite image. And I had it to do a trade show. I still have it rolled up somewhere, but I'm going to send you a photo of it. It's huge. It can cover your bed.
No, thank you.
Hey, Chuck, you've been quiet over there. What do you got? What do you got going on?
Hey, I'm just fascinated. Just just to listen to Sarah. I mean, wow, it's just amazing. You know what I mean? And if we get back to the Frankenstein movies, the one thing that really stood out to me was the laboratories. I mean, with the flashing bolt of lightning and so forth.
Oh yeah.
You know what? There, the one part where the lightning, where the coil goes up. You know what? I actually built a few of those. Those are Jacob's ladders, and
Yes.
they're complex to build. What you need is neon light, neon sign transformer, and you have to be careful when you build these things. But that could actually, like if you have a cigar in your mouth or like a cigarette, it could actually light it when the current goes up. It's pretty cool.
Well,
Yeah.
they're pretty dangerous.
They are. They're very dangerous.
That's all the inventor. That's all the inventor of Nikola Tesla.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Chuck, I need you to build me one of those so I can light my cigars with next time. I'd be the hit at the cigar lounge.
Well,
Sarah.
Halloween night, but you got to be careful. But yeah, they are cool.
Sarah, I have a question for you.
Yes.
You're very good friends with another person that, thanks to you, I met, and I was fascinated with her. Vincent Price's daughter, Victoria Price.
Victoria, yeah.
She is phenomenal. Both you guys are like the best of the best.
Thank you.
And, you know, I got to admit, though, you two guys are actually my favorite. Growing up and stuff, I can't say much more about that. But thank you for introducing me to her. I appreciate
She's
that.
a lovely human being.
Go ahead, guys.
So, Sarah, what's your next? Are you still doing conventions coming up, or do you have any lined up for the future?
Well, COVID stopped a lot of us from traveling and a lot of conventions from being held. I think my next one will probably be Monster Palooza in April in Pasadena. That's really a good show. It's grown exponentially. It's held in the Pasadena Convention Center now, but it's only been about, I would say, 8 years, and it outgrew its first two venues. It's family friendly. It's got a lot of really good artists and sculptors and makeup artists. But for 2 years or 18 months at least, I didn't do any shows because they just all closed. I just started back traveling in this October. My first destination was beautiful downtown Minot, North Dakota. My father had played there in repertory theater for 15 months back in 1915. And I was invited there, and because there is a new documentary out on my father called Boris Karloff, The Man Behind the Monster. And it played in theaters around the country. And now it's streaming on Amazon Prime. And they did a really good job on it. So if anybody's interested in seeing it, it is streaming on Amazon Prime now. And so they showed that in Minot, and then I did questions and answers and talked about that. And then I I came home, and then I flew to New Jersey, and I was there nine days, I think, and was supposed to speak at the Montclair State University, but because of the tremendous rains they had, all the streets were closed and roads were flooding. So we did it virtually and did a Q&A following the documentary. And then I went to, Cranville or something very similar to that in New Jersey. Maybe, Eddie, you know that. And they showed the film, and I spoke after that. And then I went to Chiller, stayed there and went to Chiller, which I've done for 27 years, I think. And I really enjoy doing Chiller. There's at least one of everything there, and it's very hard to tell who's in costume.
That's great. You know, it's always nice to see these conventions still going and people still enjoying these classic movies and these classic monsters. Now, I know you have some kids of yourself, and I believe some grandchildren. Are they still do they enjoy these classic movies and these classic monsters? Or are they into any of this stuff as well?
My oldest son enjoys it, and my oldest granddaughter enjoys it. I have two boys, and I have three grandchildren, one of whom is in Ohio, as I said, in his second year of residency in ophthalmology, so he doesn't really have time to watch many films at the moment. And then I have one great grandson who lives in Columbus, Ohio. He's going to be a year old. I hate to say that I have a year-old great grandchild, but I do. Oh my God! So I have one grandson and two granddaughters, and then a great grandson.
Well, that's great that they enjoy those movies too. Because I always worry, you know, as I think a lot of us do, that you know the fandom for these classic movies and these classic monsters are dwindling down, and we definitely don't want to lose any of the history because you know, as a lot of the actors and actresses over the years are starting to pass away, you know, a lot of it seems these younger generations are more interested in, you know, contemporary celebrities and movies. So it's nice to see these shows still going on, and you know, newer generations still getting involved with, you know, the research, history, and the fandom of these movies. And it's nice to still see, you know, people like you and others, like Victoria Price at these shows, you know, just, you know, talking with fans and asking or answering questions, because I'm sure, you know, it gets overwhelming at times, and it's a lot, but you know, we all definitely appreciate, you know, what you guys all do for us, and everything that you go through for, because it's definitely not easy.
I've found that these classic films of any genre are multi-generational in their appeal.
That's right.
And not just this particular genre, but in most of the genres, the musicals, the you know, the big productions, they're multi-generational, and it's so rewarding. And you know, I don't like scary movies. Bad casting, me as my father's daughter, but it is so rewarding to see these youngsters engaged in, well, given the world we live in, engaged in just about anything. And they are fully engaged in several of these genres. And it's really very, I learn something every time I do a convention or a show. The fans know far more than I could ever learn. And it goes to the word fan. Fan is fanatic. And it's a learning experience for me, and a very gratifying one. I and my father's legacy owe so much to the fans. Without them, I'd be home cleaning my own oven. Oh gosh,
that wouldn't be fun.
Hey, that was a very good point, Sarah, that you brought up, that is multi-generational. You know, one classic movie is a good example, and that's The Wizard of Oz. If you notice,
absolutely.
You know what? There's nothing in that movie that actually dates it. I think that they cut a clip out where they were doing the jitterbug, if I'm not mistaken, but they decided that would do exactly what you're saying. They would date it, so they cut it out. And you know what? And that
And
survived.
that's the film that scared me to death, and why I don't like scary movies. I was invited, as a spoiled young Hollywood kid. I was invited to a private birthday party showing of that at the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I've never gotten over it. That scared me to death.
I think
And
it's those winged.
I leave the room during Murder, She Wrote.
I think it's
the
those
biggest
winged.
wuss in the world.
I think it's those winged monkeys, Sarah. Those
Oh
things.
yeah, and the witch's shoes under the bed. Are you kidding me? Oh, scared me to death. But then fairy tales are not for children.
No,
they're not. It's parents' way of scaring their children into behaving.
Now, did you have a chance to meet Margaret Hamilton during any of those viewings at all, or during your time in Hollywood?
I've met Margaret Hamilton, yes.
Okay, yeah, because she's one of my all-time favorite actresses. So definitely would have liked to have met her. And yeah, she was scary in The Wizard of Oz. That was one that scared me when I was young as well.
It's hard to believe she was only she was only 19 in The Wizard of Oz, maybe 20. She was young. That's amazing. She was a fairly young girl. And
makeup.
Yeah, makeup.
Wow. You can't. What you have to remember, and in Frankenstein, sometimes I bring this up. The camera doesn't lie, and that makeup had to be perfect, picture perfect, if you like a pun. Picture perfect every single day. It's amazing what the gift of makeup artists.
It is.
Oh, yeah, they're absolutely fantastic. And we got about 4 minutes left here, so we're gonna go through some final words here. So Sarah, we'll start with you. You got any final words for us out there?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to join you all, and it's just been a pleasure working with you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us as well. This has been a fascinating conversation. And Brother Chuck, happy Thanksgiving. And Brother Chuck, what's your final words out there in Magic Land?
Oh, man, this was great. You know what? It's always a pleasure coming on here, and I enjoyed talking and listening to Sarah. I think she gave us a new insight to her fantastic father, and I hope the legacy lives on. And thank you for having me, and happy Thanksgiving, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, and happy Thanksgiving. Eddie, final word. What's up?
Well, it's been a pleasure working with all you guys, like always. And I'm fascinated to hear my little friend Sara here, which I love to death. And she's been so phenomenal to me. So that's about it.
Awesome. Well, once again, Sara, thank you for joining us. And I hope you had as much fun as we did. This was definitely a good time and learned a lot. That's one thing I like about these classic movies and these classic actors and actresses. No matter how much you think there's always so much more to learn, and it just never stops. And that's one of the best things about it. So definitely thank you for all the information and for such a good conversation with us.
Thank you for having me, but just ask a fan and you'll learn more than you learn.
What'll be great too, Sara, is in the future, maybe you can ask one of your sons, the one that likes the genre, to be on. It would be phenomenal to have him as a guest.
They like it, but they don't know much about it.
Well, the one I know, the one in Columbus, he's got a big weekend coming up. It's the big Michigan-Ohio State game, so I'm sure he'll be excited for that. So, but everyone out there, everybody out in podcast land, thank you for joining us once again. Don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a good review if you are enjoying what we're doing. It definitely helps us out. Also, don't forget to visit houseoftheunusual.com. We have a free forum site there. You could join, meet some like-minded individuals, have some great conversation. People are always posting great pictures of their collections and everything, and it's just absolutely great time. There's also a link to the podcast on there. And also, don't forget to find this on YouTube. Just search in House of the Unusual. Subscribe to our channel, like our videos, Eddie and Chuck always are putting out some great videos every week. It almost seems like daily. So there's always some great stuff on there to keep you entertained. So Sara, Chuck, Eddie, everybody out there, thank you for joining us and happy Thanksgiving. And I will see you guys next time.
All right. God bless.
God bless and have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.